For those that haven't been involved in the with the Club Leaders, West Auckland Club Leaders Network, it's a place to connect leaders and build stronger communities, just through making sense of information coming from many directions, sharing what's working and maybe not working so well, but obviously opportunities to think creatively and differently about the delivery of sport in the community. Format for today, or just a quick overview, is soon I'll introduce Lynette Adams to give the CE's message. Then there's Joe from Auckland Rugby, Nigel from Waitemata Rugby. Then there's an opportunity to ask some questions from the chat room. Breakout room summaries, or we'll go into breakout rooms and then we'll have the summaries. Then David George is going to jump on and just give a Sport Waitakere update, and then I'll close everything off. And then there'll be an option for some to hang around if there's any questions around the Community Resilience Fund. So that's just a quick overview. What I'll do now is I'll introduce Lynette to give the CE's message around patience, flexibility, and a little bit about what we can control maybe. Lynette, thank you very much.
Right, it is putting me on the spot. The CEO's message, that sounds all very formal. Hello everybody, thank you again for popping in to have a chat, and looking forward to hearing from you, Joe and Nigel. I think really this is just a really small group, and so hopefully we can get some really good discussion here. I often think that clubs particularly underestimate their value in the community, and I've said this each week, I think, about how important it is that clubs, the role that clubs have in helping to rebuild after COVID. And I'm just hoping that we can get some really innovative and creative ways of doing that, and just trying to relax what we're doing so that we do the right thing. And I think probably top of mind for all of us is to get our kids particularly playing again and connecting again. And I don't think the messages overnight that change from one thing to another overnight have helped for clarity. But I think Dave's giving a bit of an update around what that means in a group of 10. But yeah, just really keen to have good discussions, and looking forward to working with you to help rebuild your sport community, but actually the broader West Auckland community as well. So thanks, mate.
Cool, thanks, Lynette. We'll move on, and I'd like to introduce first up our first guest, Joe Blundell, Club Rugby Manager from Auckland Rugby, just to chat a bit about the restructure that they've gone through, and also or that's been happening, and how the current events have impacted that, and what that means moving forward from a bit of a leadership perspective, and how that might change or how the rugby landscape might look differently on the flip side of everything. So thank you very much, Joe.
Cheers, Mick, and good day, everyone. Good to see a few familiar faces, and always a pleasure to meet new people. Yeah, I'll try my best to condense what's been quite a large process in the last sort of 12 months to get us where we are today. And give you guys an idea of where we're heading. So previously, and when I state previously, the past sort of 10 years, we've had a number of what we titled RDOs, or Rugby Development Officers, and they were largely tasked with on the grass, we would term on the grass development. So a lot of coaching, a lot of skill development, a lot of talent identification, and not a lot of focus around club capability, or driving the growth of our clubs, I guess you could say. So sort of towards the end of last year, we went through an internal restructure in our community space, and out of that came 3 new roles. So one being my role, Club Rugby Manager, and the 2 staff in my team being Club Rugby Partners. And initially they were designed to split down the middle of club capability and coach development, and the goal was to drive those as our 2 key areas in the club space. As Mick said, sort of what's sort of happened, and then we've all been through this COVID-19 has given us another small opportunity to refocus those two roles and really ramp the club capability side up. So we haven't removed the coach development aspect. We've just reduced the, I guess, the percentage weighting towards it. This national lockdown and all the changes that have happened is, for us, when it initially hit, we, as everyone, sort of were a bit taken back, and we thought, what does this mean? What does this mean for our club network? Are they going to survive? But what we decided to focus on was where we could, was the positive lining, in terms of this gives us a really good opportunity to start fresh with some of our clubs, to drive change from a governance level down. Our vision as a club rugby team didn't change, and that being, we've set ourselves a task of having a minimum of 2 staff in every single one of our clubs. So we have 21 clubs overall, 17 of those being senior clubs, and a couple of other junior specific. So our vision didn't change, but what the situation allowed was to us to engage with our club leaders and say, this is a perfect opportunity to rethink how your clubs are structured. And I guess where Waitemata came in is they were going through the process prior to COVID-19, where one of their staff members actually moved on, but I guess to our luck, she's moved on to Auckland Rugby. And like I said, that opportunity was there, and we connected through Mick as well with the club, and I guess kick-started that process to re-looking at what the future looks like, and the amount of work they've done has been outstanding, to be fair. We see our role as an RSO not to go in and tell them what to do. We are here as a support function of them achieving their goals. So I'm sure we'll get into the crux of it as we go on today, but initially that's kind of where we came from, and now where we're at. And like I said, our vision hasn't changed, but we've slightly probably ramped up our club capability focus now that the situation's really shone a light on it. So pleasure to be here, and look forward to getting to know the rest of you.
Awesome, thanks, Joe. Is there doesn't appear to be any questions in the chat function at this stage. As I say, feel free to throw any questions in there at any stage. Look, it's really exciting to hear how it's given you that opportunity to ramp things up, Joe, and really excited to be. I know we've got 3 clubs in our region that work with you as well, so having such support from the RSO is great, and happy to provide a little bit of a hand there where we can as well. Thank you for that. There's no questions at this stage, so I'm going to hand over now to Nigel Chang, the chairman of Waitemata Rugby, just to share how the guidance from Auckland Rugby has and the current events have provided them with a bit of a new opportunity to think differently and restructure how things. And then obviously there was another sort of case that happened in terms of staff member moving on and things like that. So what that's meant for them, and how that new structure is going to have an impact, I guess, and build, I guess, the club moving forward. So thank you, Nigel.
Thanks, Mick, and thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to give you a little bit of insight on where we're at with regards to Waitemata Rugby, which will probably a lot of the stuff that I will say today will be in similar positions. But I suppose I've broken up a little bit on what I wanted to talk about today in terms of similar to what Joe's gone through. So previous to COVID, some of the challenges for our club was obviously the participation side of things, and looking at how we can obviously increase the numbers with regards to participation, even though that our previous couple of years have been quite good. Our volunteer base, as everyone knows, the time is precious to everyone, and it hasn't been as plush as what it has been in the past, but that was obviously a concern. And because we own and operate our own piece of land, sort of the asset management costs around the OPEX was also something that we needed to look at more clearly, and I suppose getting a bit more resource around it. And then one thing that we did do 12 months prior to COVID was, and that had sort of started to generate this, the next part of what I was going to speak about was we did a feasibility study with regards to what we would do with our piece of land moving forward, and where we saw our, what sort of information we gained in terms of doing the study from a community perspective, and how one, the challenges, or not the challenges I suppose, but how the community was changing over the next few years, what were sort of the, I suppose, other sports that were probably going to be increasing in terms of how they were played within the community and our region. And it was a little bit of an eye-opener for us around, I suppose, being to a certain extent insulated in the rugby side of things, that it started to open our eyes out around that. You know, there's a lot more than just netball, cricket, in terms of other sports. In football, there was quite a few others that are obviously impacting on participation and so forth. But at the same time, it did show that there was a need for us to still be involved in the sporting community within the region, and how we were going to position ourselves in there. So COVID-19 comes along, and obviously, you know, on top of the internal challenges that we had, has obviously brought a lot of uncertainty in terms of the season, and obviously where to from here as we go through the levels. What we did is we created an advisory group, and this advisory group is a combination of trustees who look after our asset, the committee who run the club, and also the Old Boy Network, or representatives from the Old Boy Network, who is obviously more focused around the rugby side of things and the support that they believe is required on that side. So yeah, the amalgamation of these three particular entities within our club was really, really great for us. So we were able to pick apart a little bit around what our immediate response was to COVID-19 in our membership, and then at the same time working on what we're currently doing now is our responses as the levels, as we move through these levels. The other part that obviously we recognised, I suppose, in terms of the advisory group and the capability and experience within that group was because of that, I suppose, experience, was looking at more taking the big question side of things off the committee level, in terms of finding the resources and maybe looking at some of the pathways moving forward. So that allows our committee to just work on COVID-19 and the responses that we need to provide for the membership as we now roll into the season. So this is the stuff. This is more about strategic direction as a whole. How our club is sort of structured. Previously, we had a club manager that's moved on to the AAU. She's still supporting us, but that this period, I suppose, in a sense, because everything slowed down, allowed us to have a bit of a look on where we are moving forward. As like Joe said, a lot of it is rugby, and we just go full on into the season. Come to the end of the season, and everyone just wants to have nothing to do with rugby for a break, and then we come into the next season and we sort of start up again. But there hasn't been a sort of a process on what we do between the seasons, and I think that purely down to it's a volunteer-based thing. So therefore, in terms of employment and club structure, we think that's important in terms of moving forward. So the discussions that we're having, not only with Sport Waitakere, but also with the AAU, has been sort of vital in this particular period. And we think that between the two of them, and obviously with the capability of this particular group, we'll be able to put some key decisions in place to start off 2021 with a bit more structure and process. And then outside of that is coming back to what I was talking about before in our previous 12 months, is around about the development. So what do we do? Obviously rugby is our priority, but as Lynn said, where we are in the community is also very important, and how do we help our community moving forward. So moving forward, about a year ago, we put out a sort of, what you call it, maybe a vision or a motto out there, which was Wairemata 2027. And that is, so 2027, Wairemata turns 100 in terms of the establishment of the Wairemata Rugby Club. So, obviously it's going to be a great milestone for our club, but also it's a challenge for the committee and the advisory group to try to have everything in place in terms of our structure, vision, the development of our club. Hopefully by the time that rolls around, we can celebrate that and look forward to another 100 years. But I think the thing that's been quite important, or quite important and prevalent in terms of this particular 4 to 6 week period is the notion of asking for support when support's there. I think that's been a bit of an eye-opener as to not only, obviously we were asking because we wanted to get some updates with regards to COVID, but outside of that, in terms of structure and everything else we were looking for, there's actually a lot more support out there that we sort of realised, and not trying to do it all on our own. That's probably what I'm trying to say. So that's sort of where we are and what's happened and how we're moving forward. And we really appreciate not only the stuff here with the Sports Waitaki and ARU, but also getting to hear how other clubs are progressing through this period, but also just understanding there are similarities, and then I suppose the next step from there is how can we support our regional sports groups that are in our region, regardless of whether it's rugby or not. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Nigel. I really like that last part you mentioned there about the similarities. You started off with talking about your challenges and concerns being participation and volunteer based, and then you finish the similarities. If I was to go through a lot of the workshops or surveys that we do, they'd probably be, apart from funding, they would be up there with the top 2 that always come back as to what are some concerns and issues. Look, there's been some pretty good questions here that I really want to ask and get some feedback from. So, Sarah, fantastic question here. Has it been challenging to get people with the mix of skills? So, for example, club development skills versus coaching skills, or do you find both? Do you find people naturally have both of those skills? Nigel, you want to have a crack at that one? Look, you're on mute there, Nigel. Hang on, let me unmute you. There you go.
In terms of a mix of skills, there has been a few people that have had both. I think it's, Joe might support me here, is understanding what your club needs are in terms of especially the club support side for rugby. I think there's been an easier transition for a player to go through and coach and go through the coaching, a well-established coaching sort of network that we have within New Zealand, Auckland and New Zealand rugby. It's the other side in terms of club sport, which has probably been the challenge. We've always had very entrepreneurial and great business people that have come through our club, but as time's gone along, it's the challenge of having them put as much time as what they can, or their passion wants them to do, but that obviously with their normal daily life, it's a bit of a challenge. So, and then it's the club to recognise around, okay, of the club support structure that we need in order to make sure that rugby continues to grow is the challenge, is the is a decision between paying someone or continuing to have your volunteer put in the time and effort and not get paid for, and then and the results that come out of that, and where do you focus your energies on to provide the better support for the rugby side of things. So obviously that's this what we're talking about in terms of the club structure that we're getting support from AAU from and Sports Waitakere is how do we find that balance when we look at all the tasks that we need to do, and is it worth paying someone to focus on that to get the results that we need so that rugby and the volunteers that support rugby are able to do their job. So yeah, it is a bit of a challenge, but there are people that can do it in our club, and but I think it's a time thing with everything else that goes on in our lives.
Yeah. Cool, thanks Nigel. Sarah, does that sort of answer what you were looking for there? Yeah, cool. I think the key thing there is really understanding your members as well. I know Nigel, you mentioned that you have your players who generally go into a coaching sort of pathway, but there's people potentially within your club that for anyone's club that will have set of skills that will suit certain areas. And I know this group over the last few weeks we've talked about project volunteerism and stuff like that. So what are the projects that need doing that meet a member's skills, that a skill set that they have that might not be suited elsewhere? So I think that's pretty key, is to having clear descriptions of what a project might be, or a job description might be. It's almost even a job description, and then matching that with the right type of person with the right skill set. Joe, you want to jump in here and say something?
Could you tell? No, look, Nige, firstly, you said a great question, and Nige hit it on the head. From an RSO perspective, this sort of where we are today, obviously, is a couple of years worth of work. And what we knew initially is that finding the right skills in any individual for the roles that we had available were few and far between. And what we found is that the roles that were either out there at the RSO level or at the club level weren't aligned with the students that were coming out of the graduate programs around the country. There was a mass, I guess for my own personal case, my year, I studied in Dunedin, and out of my year, we had 160 odd graduates and less than 20 working in the sports sector within 6 months. And today we're probably down to probably 7 or 8. And so that was a big driver for us, is do we have the right roles at our level and then more so at a club level. So we sort of took two approaches on that. One being what will the students look like in sort of 5 to 10 years, and this was about around the same time as a lot of the institutions changed their degrees and what they were focusing on. There was a big focus coming in on sports development. So what's that going to look like in 5 or 10 years time, and what do we need to do in the interim before those students start graduating? And I guess the answer to that is we have to develop them. We, as an RSO, we have a responsibility to find the talent, develop the talent, and then make it available at a club level. So all of those types of things are a work in progress at the moment. But yeah, to Nige's point around, it's important to look within the club first. That club connection is critical, and finding the right balance of person is just as important as whether they have the skills or not. Because those skills, as we all know, they can be learned. So, great question.
I almost forgot to unmute myself. Cool, thanks, Joe. Thanks for that. Another great question is, there's some good ones in here. Michael, thank you very much for this one. What's the definition of success for the club? I know Vaughan's going to have a smile on his face because I've been hitting him up on what's the vision for the club, but but what's the definition of success for the club versus Auckland Rugby? Has COVID adjusted the priority levels within your planning programs? Nigel, Vaughan or Joe, anyone jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in and then pass to the club guys. Yeah, look, another great question. Again, through our restructure was changing what success looks like. For a long time, it's been success is numbers, and largely due to the funding model we operate under. Now that's always going to be there at a certain level, as long as we are under that funding model. But I guess for our vision, it was success looks like a club operating that when you turn up, the doors are open, the kids are having fun, the lights are on, they're not, they're not running out of money and not being able to provide that experience. That's very early in terms of where we're at with that process, and clarifying that across the region. Like I said, there's always a level of the easy report of how many players you've got, but for my team specifically, the success is how well's the club run and what's the experience like within it. Nigel, did you want to touch on that from your club's perspective?
Yeah, sure. A great question, and I think that, and Vaughan will be able to probably mention a few things as well, but we had a strategic meeting about 6 or 8 months ago, or maybe it was a year before that, I'm not sure, and it was quite funny. We decided to have this big old strategic plan, and the goal was to come out with a strategic direction going forward. But what had happened was we spent 3 hours at the first part and just trying to understand who we are as a club, how we came to be, and what we were trying to achieve in terms of a vision. And I don't even think we're there yet, to be honest. We're still going through that process. But the sort of key points I wanted to come out of there was, exactly what Joe's saying. Is success in being a sustainable club, that we keep it open? Is it winning 5 championships and being the top 4 rugby team week in, week out, having a dynasty? Or is it having the flashiest building on the block sort of type thing with, where we are? So we have been discussing that. One of the things that came out of that strategic vision discussion was, we were an amalgamation of 3 regional clubs at that particular time that joined to make Waitemata, and our forefathers bought this particular spot where we're at. And the thing that we all agreed is that it was a place where you could come from any background, any job, to come and have a beer and have a meal and share in something that we love, which is rugby on the field. So a gathering spot. So, taking all of that into account, we're still trying to get to that point where we have that mixture of all of those things that we want to achieve and have a great vision of moving forward. So, like I said, all of those 3-4 things, if we can achieve them all at once, I think would cover our success as a club. However, it's a big task, and we're going through that process at the moment. If we look at our immediate terms, the 2 things in terms of opening up our doors and having a high participation rate would be key at this particular point. But obviously we want to think bigger than that, and obviously have a more rounded approach to how we move forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Nigel. Thanks, Joe. Strategic plans are interesting. Is the 5-year or 3-year strategic plan still relevant? I talked about that a couple of weeks ago, and is 3 and 5 having a vision and 3 or 5 bullet points that feed into that vision more relevant than a 3 to 5 year strategic plan? Try it. See if it works. Hey, thanks guys for answering that. Hope Michael, I hope that's sort of answered that one a little bit for you. I'm gonna hand over to Steve Trim. What is Auckland Rugby's engagement with tracing applications for the club network? Don't know if you want to elaborate that on, Steve, at all. And
yeah, just an understanding of when we return to play, what is the processes you guys are thinking to have in place to actually trace people at either trainings or in game day situations? So if anything did untoward happen in regards to an infection, how would you actually be able to capture who was there on the day?
Great question. I will have to be careful here. We have some official communication coming out in the next 20 minutes, which the club won't have seen yet. But essentially, in short, we are guided by New Zealand Rugby, who are guided by Sport New Zealand. So those guidelines still apply all the way through to our club system. From a contact tracing aspect, we, as again guided by New Zealand Rugby, will provide all our clubs with a recommendation of apps that we have looked into and that we feel hit those guidelines that we've been provided. We do give the clubs the decision in every aspect, and so this doesn't change in that term, as the club can provide. The club has the opportunity to choose what best works for them, as long as they fall within those measures. So yeah, there's two there that we will be recommending, but again, the club will make the decision on that. There is the further guidelines and procedures around how we get from A to B, obviously, but like I said, I've just got to be a bit careful before those comms come out. My boss wouldn't be too happy. So, but look, Steve, more than happy over the next couple of days if you want to pick that question up offline, and I can talk you through a bit more depth of what we're looking at from an RSO level.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks, Joe.
No worries.
Yeah, okay. Well, we've done a little bit of work. Obviously, a lot of our stuff is waiting on the AAU guidelines, just to make sure that what we're thinking of is in line with that. I suppose one initiative in terms of within that junior spaces, because it's, with our senior space, sort of easy to control to a certain extent. But with the junior space, a couple of things that we're thinking of, and I'm not sure if anyone can inform me, but I think outside we can have up to 100. Is that correct? Or is that not correct? Anyway, we sort of took that one on last week when it was around. And what we were thinking of is two things. One was controlling the space where the kids are playing. So we were thinking of breaking, we got two fields that are closely together, but breaking our two fields up to split into 6 different sections, and allocate team to train in each area. From there, we would, in terms of contact tracing side of things, we're lucky enough to have an entry and exit point in our premises. So we're thinking of maybe a drop-off type system where we can have kids dropped off at a certain point, obviously go to their designated area within the field with their coaches and their team. And if the parents wanted to stay around, we're still getting some information with regards to being in the club rooms, but if they wanted to stay around, we have another area behind Sports Waitakere where they can park. But we were trying to restrict the numbers in those particular areas, obviously with the numbers, but also just thinking of too many people walking around the area. And then at that point, obviously we can do the contact tracing and use the methods that are going to be presented to us. But then it also offers our kids to come back to that same point and parents to come and pick their children up and carry on forward back home, sort of thing. So that sort of, because obviously the junior network is probably bigger than the senior network, but that's sort of how we're possibly going to look forward to managing that. And that's what we thought of last week, but obviously in a week's time, it's changed 3 times. So we're waiting on Joe and his team to get back to us to make sure that we're on the right wavelength. So but that's sort of an idea and suggestion on what we're looking at in terms of handling that contact tracing.
Awesome, thanks guys. And no doubt you're waiting for the next 15 minutes there, Nigel. Hey, next is Michael, got another one, excellent. and it is another good one, and you might want to elaborate on this. So have you got any idea on the impact of COVID on membership and participation levels? How are you finding your engagement / communication plans are making an impact on that? Michael, did you want to, is that, if I hit that on the head, or did you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
That's hit it on the head. It's just more trying to identify whether you're expecting to see a significant decrease in participation due to COVID, and whether the communication programs you're running at the moment during that period is having a positive or negligible effect of that.
Yeah, great question. I guess from our perspective, and Nigel knows specifically down at the club, but from a region perspective, we actually surveyed through all our clubs, all of their members, and that's due to be released tonight, tomorrow morning, tonight, depending how the final sign-off goes. But what we've seen out of the responses from that is a lot of people are eager to get back, and a lot of people are unsure. So we won't have a good idea for another couple of weeks around who actually turns up on the field. But from what we're seeing, the respondents we had, about 74% are keen, and just as long as the guidelines and hygiene protocols they are aware of, they're happy to get back involved. And again, there's about 24% are unsure, given their current personal situations. We would like to think that our communication through to our clubs has had a part to play in that, but I think that would, I don't think we can make that stance. I think people in general are keen to be back and gain some meaning outside of their bubbles, and I think sport provides that on a much larger context than just the communication that's happened. But yeah, Nigel, how are you feeling on that question, mate?
Yeah, so in terms of I suppose feedback during the COVID-19 period, it's been it was been quite slow in terms of feedback from our membership. I don't think anyone had any questions. They sort of knew we were in lockdown. Over the last couple of weeks, it has ramped up, in particular with people that probably were unsure and asking about refunds and so forth because they've already registered. But you know, we're keen to. We were thinking of doing our own survey, but when we heard about the ARU one, we were keen to see what those results would be. From a senior perspective, they are all keen to get back into it. It's just the juniors, so got a few responses from some coaches and that are wanting to discuss a bit further around the training, so that could just only mean that they want to get their teams together. But I suppose, you know, the next couple of weeks will give us a better idea. We don't really have a major response in terms of having a good idea on where it's at the moment. We, you know, in terms of the numbers, we probably, our expectation is that it probably will drop from a realistic point of view, but we just probably don't know, and we don't know how much that may be going forward.
Cool, thanks guys. It's an interesting one. I know there's been a couple of conversations with a number of other codes, and I think it was in one of our chats 2 weeks ago, the mention was, the comment was around initial engagement was really good from the membership in terms of engaging with the members, and then after a couple of weeks it sort of died down a little bit, and they had to rethink what that engagement looked like to get that interest back into it again. So that's that online engagement, just to keep the members aware that, hey, the club's still here and we still want to engage in that sort of stuff. So what that looks like as they come back, that's another question. I like thanks Joe for sharing those, your member survey about 74% being keen and 25% unsure, because that was another thing going around, is you don't have those that are real diehards that are keen to come back and those that are unsure, but what are we going to do how do we meet the needs of both of them within our clubs as well? So some really good questions. Michael, I don't know if that's answered everything for you.
as much as we can at this stage.
Yeah, exactly. Question from Tyrone. Joe, how difficult has it been to filter down information to clubs with so much uncertainty and grey areas coming from government and from government announcements?
Good question. It has and it hasn't. I guess what I mean by that is we are just as eager as our club leaders are to provide answers. What's been positive is that everyone, and much larger than our network, everyone's in the same boat, and everyone kind of understands that the information being provided to them is not being withheld. It's getting to them as soon as the person giving it to them has it, if that makes sense. But at times, yes, it has been frustrating because, you know, for us as an RSO, we just want to be able to provide those answers. We've been very lucky in terms of the communication from above has been very clear, so we know when to expect it, which has given us some relief in terms of talking with our clubs and saying, look, we might not have something specific now, but you know, whether it be Wednesday, Thursday, from whatever the day may be, is that when we can expect to have it and you'll have it straight away. So yeah, frustrating, but also I think given the situation, it's worked pretty well. Hope that answers your question, Tyrone.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Joe. Look, I think there's another one. There's another couple here. What have we got here? Tracing apps with us. Yeah, so there's a question here from David around contact tracing apps. That's something certainly that we've been looking at, and there's a whole heap out of them, ID Me and all of the others. But Joe, is there any in particular that you're looking to use?
There's probably two parts to that. Us as a business have implemented one, and that will be the one we're recommending to our clubs. It falls on, well, it's been produced by the same company that runs our database, if that sort of gives you the answer. But yeah, you might have just mentioned it. But yeah, that's like, again, and I can't say too much until the boss puts the comms out. The beauty of the one we're recommending, as I've been told by their CEO, is that it covers multiple sports. So if you have parents with kids playing different codes, then the efficiency is there from that platform. So I'll watch this space.
All right. The next one is, with schools becoming more of a safety zone, would Auckland Rugby look at moving junior club rugby to be based at schools? And I know this is a sort of a very, I briefly touched this with Wider Matter at one stage, is reciprocating some matches and stuff like that. But Joe, what are your thoughts on that one?
Just clarity on the question. Sorry, you cut out a bit there.
Can I add to it, mate? So my question is, our schools are currently going through protocol and processes to make schools safe for their students, trying to leverage that rather than our clubs having to reinvent the wheel. Would Auckland Rugby look at moving maybe junior rugby to schools to support the clubs?
In terms of training or playing or
both?
Both. Look, initially, no. We are in conversations with the school executive committee. We're confident in the guidelines and essentially the blueprint we're going to provide, that clubs will be able to provide the opportunity in a safe environment. That's taking into consideration that it's going to be a number of weeks before we actually see kids back out there. Where our message is aligned with the message we received earlier on the week from Sport New Zealand in terms of being patient. We've had a number of meetings this week with our governance committees, and that's been our key message. Is, look, as much as we all want to be out there on Saturday, the reality is we're not going to be. There's a very extensive process each of our clubs will have to go through. from a health and safety aspect. We've also got to, work with the council on when they can provide that. So we have explored the opportunity, Mike, but like I said, we're confident by the time kids get out there, clubs will be in a very good position to keep them safe and provide that experience.
Cool, thanks, Joe. And I think that sort of nails the questions. Look, team, what we normally would do, I let those questions go in this forum because of the size of the group versus heading into breakout rooms. And normally I do talk a little bit about, we have a couple of discussion points, but I think a lot of those questions, to a point, covered some of those questions that or the topics that we were going to discuss. So I'm happy to, unless there's other questions, I don't know, there's one more. If there's no more questions coming up, then what I'd like to do is I'm going to just create a little quick summary of some of the stuff that I've heard, and then I'm going to pass it over to Dave just to give a little bit of a Sport Waitakere update, and then we'll bring the whole thing to a close. So some of the things that I really enjoyed hearing was when Nigel was talking about talking about the season, what happens between the seasons. So we come play rugby for a season, then we go away, and then we come back and play rugby. But now with their new structure, they're looking at what happens in between and what the collaboration can be. And there's talk about, I've written the word down here, collaboration is key, because I know Steve, who's just left us, has been talking about that as well, as has netball and other RSOs. And I think as clubs, we can come and bring that together as well. Strategic plan was one I brought up, but certainly the commonalities around concerns, so participation, volunteer-based, and other things like that. And there's a whole heap of other things that I haven't quite put my circles around. Where are they? Updating the guidelines, so making sure that we are hearing the information and take guidance from your governing bodies like Joe, who are also taking guidance from their NSOs and the government and the Ministry of Health. So look, that's just a very quick summary. There's a lot of good stuff come out of there, but I don't think there's any more questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand pass the ball over to Dave, just to give a little bit of an update, and if there's any questions left after that.
Cool, thanks, Mick. Kia ora, everyone. So I guess just looking at the kind of the names in here, so we've got the Waitemata Rugby Club, Auckland Rugby, and Auckland Climbing. I was going to do a little bit of an update on the Community Resilience Fund, and I know that there's been a bit of conversation with Michael at the climbing club, but I was just wondering, do you want me to do a quick 5-minute kind of yarn on that, or are you guys fairly over it? Up to you. I'm kind of looking at Nigel, Vaughan, Joe, Michael.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't mind a bit of an update. We haven't applied yet. So. Okay.
All right. Well, I'll quickly give you the background then. So there's basically a $15 million, well, it's a $25 million package, $15 million from Sport New Zealand, $15 million of that has been put towards the Community Resilience Fund. My understanding is about 4.8 million has been kind of kept aside for Auckland, for our clubs. It is a first in, first served fund. So if you are keen to get in as soon as the application form is online. I believe it's going online this evening, but it will almost certainly be on there for tomorrow morning. And they're trying to run payments as soon as people are putting their applications through. So first payment could go out on Friday, apparently. So basically, clubs can apply for up to $1,000 and RSOs up to $40,000, and it has to be linked to kind of material hardship that your club or RSO has been through as a result of COVID. So between April 1st to the end of June, if your club or RSO can prove that you have lost revenue, lost income because of COVID, then it's right up your alley. There's one kind of caveat to that, is that you have to be, as a club, affiliated to your to a Sport New Zealand affiliated kind of code. So obviously affiliated as New Zealand Rugby, Auckland Rugby affiliated to them. So as a club, if you're affiliated to Auckland Rugby, then that's spot on. So with that in mind, the rugby club is absolutely eligible for that. What else have we got? So in terms of just as a bit of a heads up, and we can send this list out to you actually, although it will be on the website as well. A couple of things that will be worth you getting ready just before that application form comes out, because basically you'll fill in a few boxes, but then you need to submit some bits of information as well. So one is your incorporated society number or New Zealand business number if applicable, your GST number, your latest bank statement. So I'm guessing that will probably cover the last 3 to 4 months. A letter of endorsement if your organisation is a Māori sports club or an organisation which is not affiliated. So obviously that's not something you guys need to worry about, because Sport New Zealand have a list of the affiliated clubs running straight through the system. So that's good. The application form itself is actually through Active Auckland Sport and Recreation, so it'll be on their website. Again, we'll send out all of that information. However, if you need someone to walk you through the application, then just get hold of, whether it's myself, Mick, Javid, Deepika, any of the Sport Waitakere team, and we can help you answer any questions you need to. It's a fairly straightforward process. It's not necessarily a kind of a pass or fail as such. It's more if you can show that you've been impacted financially by COVID, $1,000 is yours basically. And it's, as I say, it's quite a quick turnaround. Tomorrow evening between 7 and 8 p.m. and also on Friday between 2 and 3 p.m. there's a forum that Active are running similar to this, which is just about the Community Resilience Fund. So they're going to actually do a walkthrough of the application form and then open to any questions. So I don't think it's going to be overly complicated, the application form. But if you do feel like that's something that you want to tune into, then please do. So that in a nutshell is the Community Resilience Fund. I'm not sure if there's any immediate questions from you guys or from anyone.
The only question I have is have you heard anything with regards to cash reserves? Or so obviously you provide your statements just on the account where you pay the bill, or when you say statements, do you mean everything we have? Or?
I believe it's everything, and I'm not sure what the line is on cash reserves. I'm just trying to look through some.
I know, Dave. I've just read it right now. It's just come in, because there is some there's not clarity around that, but it's not an issue for clubs. Okay, so don't worry about it for clubs, but RSOs it could be. But there is conversations with Sport New Zealand. They're going to review that, because we're basically saying an RSO that's got good prudent, being prudent, got good reserves, they might need it for a project, blah, blah, blah. They're going to be adversely effective as to one that hasn't done any kind of saving for a rainy day. So hopefully that will be addressed. Because the other thing is that if you spend all your reserves now, it's actually the post-COVID that you need it for the recovery, and that's when you're not going to have it, and that's when insolvency may happen. So hopefully that will change.
Yeah, for sure. And the language is coming out around, your actual loss of income. So I guess that backs up what Annette says a little bit, that you will have had membership and money over the bar and blah, 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 blah. And obviously that's happening at the moment. So you are materially affected by COVID-19.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I would do, as I say, can I just suggest that as soon as actually there's if you haven't already done it, Mick will send around a link after, maybe. Mick, has an action for you. There's a application of register of interest on that Active website, where you literally just put in your details, and as soon as the application form is ready to go, it will get sent out to you, or the link will get sent out to you, and then you can fill it in and send it off. And as I say, I encourage you guys to do that just as quickly as you can to make sure that you get some of the money. I would suggest it's going to take a good couple of weeks for that money to actually go out the door, but we've had a real massive amount of interest in this from a number of phone calls I received today, even just to.
Yeah, there's over 300 as of this morning. There was over 300 entries into the expression of interest. So.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's clubs and RSOs, isn't it? Okay, so that's kind of my update, really. Back to you, Matt.
Awesome, thanks, David. Hey, normally at this point, I throw a bit of actions and a challenge out there, but for all of you that are here, I'm pretty in regular contact, so I'll put those challenges out to you personally. And I think it's around, and it's what we're all doing is thinking differently and working out how can we provide sport a little bit differently or better, or however you want to look at it. So that said, I'll no doubt we'll be in touch. You've all got my number. You've all got my Zoom. No, not Zoom. You've got my email, but we can get you on that. So look, just want to thank everyone for attendance today. Massive thank you to Joe and Nigel for sharing your stories and answering the questions. So thank you very much for that. Next week, we're going to change up the time. We're going to hit a 6 p.m. time slot, and just because we're going into that level 2. So most of us will be going back to work somehow. And obviously, we've had level 3's had a bit of an impact on people attending. And so we're going to look at the 6 p.m. time slot for next week. And then from there, we'll also have a look at the regularity of these chats. But at the moment, they've been fantastic and some really good information. And as I talk about that collaboration, and the more we get these opportunities, the better and easier that collaboration can be in terms of winter and summer codes and memberships and creating hubs versus clubs and all of those crazy things that we really want to try as we come out of this time. If you want to connect to us to explore anything differently, there's Dave, there's Jarvid, there's myself, there's Deepika, there's heaps of us. Get in touch with us. Yeah, and that's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Nigel. And
thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
4 o'clock.
Thank you.
And Joe, tell us what his contact tracing forum is now.
It's actually been pushed to 4:30, but it's coming out. It's coming out.
CIA.
Yeah. Like I said, Mick probably released it for me. So if you remember what Mick said, you'll have a good idea what we're using.
Good old Sporty. No worries. Awesome, team. Hey, thank you all very much, and look forward to catching up next week before I shoot off to Fiordland.
No worries. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.